This morning, I'm honored and humbled to present to you a great leader and a friend, Mr. Chibli Mallat. Chibli has been a leading advocate for nonviolence in the Middle East and the rest of the world. He's a great scholar, a lawyer, and a political leader, a democratic leader. Sorry, I have to read from the written bio to be accurate. Mr. Chibli Mallat is a lawyer and a law professor, tenured intern in Britain.
We can show it in the Middle East. It's a very important event, as I hope you will appreciate from my modest remarks. Let me say first how privileged I am to be with you today, because I think that this could be, that this is certainly for me a very unusual moment when, although we worked together with Dr. Young for over a year now, this is the first time that I can be physically with you. And for that, I'm extremely grateful, because it is, although we know how important the Egyptian, Tunisian, Syrian, Bahraini revolution has been in China, never was the Chinese government more repressive, more scared than when he saw the power of non-violent people in the streets. And I know from you, from other colleagues, that this is the greatest fear that the Chinese government has encountered since Tiananmen. So I prepared some more formal, critical talk to share with you, because I'm eager that our two revolutions, our two non-violent huge movements that cover really most of the world, and the right to non-violence, the NGO that Dr. Young and I work with, has an author from Mauritania to China, from Nouakchott to Beijing. So we believe really that there is a commonality of the search for freedom, which is very special and very new, because it is built on non-violence. So now let me give you some of my written remarks, which again include more of a common thinking together on how to bring our two revolutions, our two huge movements forward in a way that we see, with the change of regime in the Middle East and in China, a very, very different planet than the one we have witnessed so far. So the title of the talk is Nonviolence from Damascus and Manama, the capital of Bahrain, to Moscow and Beijing. Why the Middle East revolution makes dictatorships tremble. We are into the second year of the Middle East nonviolent revolution. I had the privilege to share a few thoughts with you last year, which Dr. Young kindly read to me. They focused on our common struggle for freedom from Mauritania to China. The revolution, to be complete, could not remain exclusively Middle Eastern, as we then noted. It must be a world historic revolution to be complete. A revolution in which our colleagues in China see models of success and failure to draw upon in the same way as we draw much of our inspiration from the precedent in Tiananmen Square. Tiananmen, ladies and gentlemen, marked the convergence of all world cultures against cultural relativists of many sorts onto a common humanity defined by freedom. Tiananmen is special in history. It constitutes the embodiment of man versus tank and the absolute moral superiority of man over tank. We know from Burma that the nonviolent struggle is universal, and that it is best led by women. We know from the tenacious Uyghur resistance that China's outskirts are no different, that their struggle is universal, that it is the same struggle as the one carried out by the Free Han of Beijing, and that the Uyghur are fortunate to be led by a remarkable woman who is with us today. And we have known for over 50 years that the struggle in Tibet is universal, and that it is anchored in a saintly man, whose frailty is as powerful as the non-violence he spread in his people and across the world in the face of one of the most dire occupations in modern history. And in 2011, the world, that is not the free people of China and the Middle East who knew better for having lived dictatorship across decades, but the rest of the world discovered in Tunis, Cairo, and Damascus that Arabs, Muslims, and Middle Easterners are no different than Burmese, Uyghur, Tibetans, or Chinese. With repeated thanks from us in the Middle East to the tank man of Tiananmen, who ended the myth of cultural relativism, and with our joint pride for standing up together collectively against the dictator's tank, I would like to share with you today some further thoughts on the difficult path of nonviolence towards freedom and on its institutionalization across the Middle East. Let me dwell on some of its most elegant achievements and some of its most difficult challenges. Challenges first. The Middle East challenge is sectarian, what we refer in our conference to today as ethnic. They are the two sides of the very same coin. One is religious sectarian, the other is racial ethnic. In both cases, the marker of difference is meaningless for basic rights and full of meaning for the beauty of our human diversity. Authoritarianism in China and the Middle East put this simple equation on its head, the equation of the basic rights of all humans and the beauty of human diversity. Authoritarianism puts it on its head and adds an ugly twist of its own. Authoritarianism in China and the Middle East abhors diversity, detests diversity, and denies the right to difference to any group that it victimizes. This at a time when all citizens, including its own group-conforming citizens, on the other side of this false difference, everyone is denied their basic rights. So, dictatorship denies diversity and victimizes members of the other group, especially when its own group-conforming citizens are denied their basic rights. The tactic we see in so-called provinces is to insist by the authoritarian government on that marker of difference and transform it into a focus of additional victimization for the dominance of the authoritarian group in power. So you see how this dual proposal, basic rights for everyone, beauty and human diversity, you see how this basic equation of humanity is set on its head. Diversity is considered ugly, while basic rights are denied to all, with the following ugly twist. Specifically victimized are those among the Chinese who do not want to humiliate Uyghurs and who do not want to continue the military occupation of Tibet. They are turned into the worst enemies of the authoritarian government, very much in the way that Saddam Hussein of the group conforming Arab Sunnis in Iraq was relentless in killing any Arab Sunni from his own group, including his sons-in-law and his grandchildren. The man killed his grandchildren when they defected and said no to the killing sprees of Shi'is and Kurds in Iraq. Saddam was relentless in his hanging without trial 42 leading merchants of Baghdad, the massive majority of whom were Arab Sunni, to further mark the point. Similarly, Bashar al-Assad of Syria is relentless towards those members of the Alawi conforming group who show any sympathy to the Sunnis he is massacring by the hundreds. And the Prime Minister of Bahrain is carrying a worldwide campaign against the Bahraini Sunnis who stand with the Bahraini Shi'is in confronting the senseless repression by the government of the peaceful, non-violent Third Revolution. It is, ladies and gentlemen, a diabolic twist. In China and in the Middle East, the exacerbation of sectarian and ethnic difference is a conscious, deliberate, systematic tactic. Indeed, it is a strategy of survival for authoritarianism. Setting up Shi'is against Sunnis, Christians against Muslims, Jews against non-Jews is key to the dominance of the authoritarian government in power. In order to deny everyone freedom, the dictator multiplies the intensity of the same denial of freedom to a specific religious or ethnic group called a minority, hoping through that trite, mediocre, and long-established Machiavellian technique to keep the country in a virtual constant civil war and, when necessary, drive it into a full-blown, real civil war for the sole purpose of justifying his continued dominance in power. This is a hard challenge to face, as we know from Syria, where the exacerbation of the repression against the Sunni population is used to drive the country into a war between the numerical Sunni majority and the multiple Syrian religious and ethnic minorities, Alawis, Christians, Kurds. We see the same exact technique in Bahrain. The denial of freedom to Bahrainis is carried out by a dictatorial prime minister who's been in power for over 40 years in the form of Shia mongering. The Shi'is are going to eat up Bahrain. That's the argument. That policy victimizes Bahraini Shi'is, along with considering any dissenting Sunni as the ultimate traitor, including, ladies and gentlemen, the Crown Prince of Bahrain himself. This scene will be familiar to you all present today. Just replace the Sunnis of Syria by Muslim Uyghurs or the Shi'is of Bahrain by Tibetans. The common features of this sectarian ethnic repression strategy are staggering across the whole span of the planet from Nouakchott to Beijing. We have, therefore, a huge challenge ahead of us. And it's a common challenge down to the detail of the tactics we must use to undermine authoritarianism. The challenge, and it is immense, is not to read from the page dictated by the dictators, but for us to dictate to them from the page of human freedom. It's not easy, of course, because our page is richer, more complex, more colorful than the gray page of dictatorship. How we prevent the sectarian authoritarian government, its brutal victimization, is easier said than done. One cannot hide one's head in the sand by ignoring the problem. It will not go away. The exacerbation of sectarian and ethnic discrimination is essential to the survival of the dictator.